For the preservation of the Quran, the minimum requirement is one variant. Let me put this in. Let me show you the implications of this.
Right. Okay.
Let me tell you the implications of this. Right. So, for example, it's commonly known. I'm sure you know that is Surah Al-Fatiha, the first chapter of the Quran. It says, yeah, we have two ways of reciting the third verse, which is Malik Yawmuddin and Malik Yawmuddin.
Yep.
That the King of the Day of Judgment and the Possessor of the Day of Judgment.
Yep.
On this view, all you need for preservation of the Quran to happen is just one of those variants. So in other words, if I don't have in my possession both qira'as, Malik Yawmuddin, which is the possessor of the Day of Judgment, and Malik Yawmuddin, which is the king of the Day of Judgment, then still only one would be enough to preserve the Quran. And the evidence for that, they say, is, for example, when we read the Quran in Taraweeh, like in Ramadan right now, every day we read a portion of the Quran, we only really read it with one qira'ah. Some mosques, some mosques they do it in like many qira'ahs, like Muntada mosque. However, like every day they'll do a different qira'ah. The point is that the point I'm making is all that is required is just one variant. So if you're asking me, first of all, the issue of preservation. In terms of preservation, the conservative view of preservation of Quran is only one variant may exist, and that will be it. So that would mean if there's any other variant that's outside of the Quran, that's not part of the final codex or whatever, that could have been a variant which is sanctioned by the Prophet, but there's no requirement for it to be preserved from that perspective.
Okay, but I think that in effect concedes my point, which is that perfect preservation, at least on the second view, isn't perfect.
No, but that's the idea. That they would say perfect is a subjective term, right? So we have to specify what we mean.
So what I mean by that, though, is objectively speaking, there is not a single authoritative source, but rather there are many different sources. Your view on whether they're authoritative is, whether you accept the first view or the second view. But ultimately, if you accept the second view, then you would have to concede that it's not perfectly preserved because there are different ones.
No, I mean, it depends on how you define perfect. So they would say that is perfect preservation. That's the argument.
But that's inherently not true. Like no textual manuscript scholar would say it's perfect preservation, right?
The issue,
because there are variants.
Okay, well,
the presence of a variant means that it's not perfectly preserved.
No, but the variant itself is explained from within the tradition.
Right, that's fine. You may re-understand your interpretation of what it means to be perfectly preserved, but from a scholarly perspective, they wouldn't say it's perfectly preserved because there are different variants.
The word, as I said, the word perfect is fraught with subjectivity. So we need to be clear what we're talking about.
So I'm talking about textual criticism, when we're trying to figure out what the original author said and did. Right? If there are different copies that say different things, then we would have to concede that it's not on that scale perfectly preserved. Do you agree?
No, not like that. No, because what they would say that they use the word kamal, which is the Arabic word for like complete. That's, I think, more. It's an easier way to kind of, because otherwise it's subjective. What's perfect, what's not perfect. So
obviously that's going to get out of it.
What I will concede is that certainly there's a difference of opinion as to what is the minimum requirement for preservation in Islam.
Right.
There are some scholars who say that all of the variants must be preserved. Okay, and they say therefore the 10 major qira'ahs that we have today, that they must be, all of the variants that the Prophet said must be within those 10. Whereas the early view, which I take, is that actually that's not the case. That in order for preservation to happen, all you only require is one variant.
Right, but what you're talking about here, and I think you summed it up quite well there, is that preservation, not a perfect preservation, because ultimately if it was perfect in the way that we understand it from a scholarly point of view, there would only be one copy.
I'll tell you something, Chris, which I think you're right about. When you do listen to, on prima facie value, when you listen to this kind of, when people say that the Quran word for word, letter for letter, it makes it seem as if there's no variance. I agree with that, and I think that's a mistake on our behalf, that we didn't clarify that early in the da'wah.
Cool,
it's where people in the past, 20, 30 years ago, didn't explain to the people, because this is known to Islamic historians for 1,400 years. You know, textual criticism, for example, some say that, well, Islam doesn't have textual criticism, but the truth is, it's called naqd al-qira'at, or textual criticism of the qira'at. That was there in the early days of Islam. So people that know this field, okay, they will tell you that actually there was a textual criticism tradition in Islam.
Yeah, I agree that there was. I think largely because the companions differed about what their actual.
No, the issue was not with the companions at all.
But they did differ about it, right?
No. The issue is never. Let me tell you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you. Let me make the argument for you.
Okay. Yeah.
If you look at Sahih Bukhari, for example, you'll find. I'll tell you exactly what you're saying. I'll give you the evidence for it.
Okay.
Abu Darda Abu Darda in Sahih Bukhari, he recites Surah Al-Layl, which is chapter 92 of the Quran. So it's recited in the 10 qira'ahs as وَمَا خَلَقَ ذَكَرُ الْأُنْثَى. Yeah? And who created the male and the female? He says, no, I'm going to read it وَالذَّكَرِ وَالْأُنْثَى. And the male and the female. So it's an oath. God is taking an oath. He says, I'm by the male and the female. He says, I'm not going to recite وَمَا خَلَقَ. He said, I heard it from the Prophet as وَمَا خَلَقَ ذَكَرَ وَالْأُنْثَى. Yeah? Now the point is that on this view, you could say that, well, in that case, there would seem to be a difference of opinion between the companion and the rest of them.
Right.
But this is where it's solved. For example, the famous hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab and Hisham ibn Hakam. Yeah. Let me finish, please.
Okay.
Because it's on your point. Please, bro. But you have to be patient. Please, just let me say. What I'm saying is that Umar ibn al-Khattab and Hisham ibn Hakam, hadith is very sahih, it's authentic.
Sure.
That there were Hisham ibn Hakam, who's a companion, he was reciting Surah Al-Furqan, chapter 25 of the Quran. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, as he was being led in the prayer by Hisham ibn Hakam, he said that I heard Hisham ibn Hakam reading the Quran على غير الوجه الذي أقرأنيها رسول الله, on a way that's different to the way the Prophet Muhammad taught me. So he said, I'm not sure if you come across this. Right. Let me finish the hadith.
Okay.
Let me finish the hadith. So he got angry. He said, I got so angry.
Yeah, I read this one as well.
Yeah, and so he got angry, and then he waited for him to finish the prayer. He grabbed him.
And he took him to the Prophet Muhammad.
He took him to the Prophet Muhammad. And then the Prophet Muhammad said, هكذا أنزلت or هكذا نزلت.
It's been revealed this way, it's been revealed this way.
Exactly, it's been revealed this way and this way. So we're showing what?
Right.
Showing it goes back to the Umda hadith, which, or the main hadith, which is Unzil Quran ala sab'ati ahruf. The Quran has been revealed in 7
different aruf.
Yeah, beautiful.
Different modes.
Great, you're good,
okay.
mashallah. You're good.
So my question is then, it seems as if the early companions disagreed about what that was.
Yeah, but then the disagreement was resolved by the Prophet.
It wasn't by the Prophet though. It was resolved by Uthman ultimately, right?
No. It was resolved by the Prophet because look, I've just given you an example. We can agree,
Yeah, I agree on that example.
Yeah,
what I'm saying to you though is that even after that, there were still arguments among the early companions who knew Muhammad themselves, who were great reciters of the Quran, and yet they had different understandings about what was Quran and what was not Quran. Then Uthman came along and standardized that Quran in your Sahih Hadith.
So there's a degree of truth in what you're saying.
Okay.
The thing is, here's the thing.
I appreciate honesty.
Yeah, there's a degree of truth. There was still, so some Sahaba, some companions, like as I said, Abu Darda, Ibn Mas'ud, Ibn Abbas, they would recite how they heard the Quran, which might have been different to the way somebody else heard it. But as I said before, they are saying they heard it that way because it's on this harf, on this variant.
Right, but then you have to explain to me, why were they arguing about something if the Prophet made it clear which is acceptable and which isn't?
Okay, here's the thing. If it was seen as that they are saying something that's other than the Quran, it would have been deemed as kufr, as disbelief in heresy, which it never was. So this is why I say there was a degree of truth. Right. There was an atmosphere of acceptability.
Right. Okay, but we need to remember here. So
come. We are Muslim people are here. Come and stand in their presence. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah.
What I don't understand though is
it's your Muslim people. La ilaha illallah. Muslim people. I am not a Muslim. 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 I can never be a Muslim.
Take 2 steps back. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, go to Muslim people.
You liar.
Speak to Muslim people.
Liar, ya donkey. Liar, ya hamar.
Muslim people.
Liar, ya hamar.
Speak to Muslim people.
La ilaha illallah.
Why are you not speaking to Muslim people? Muslims sent you to me.
Muslim God and
Speak to
you
Muslim
donkey.
people.
so.
Speak to Muslim people. Speak to Muslim people. Why are you coming to me? Why are you coming to me? You have your Muslim people. Go to them and speak to them. Why are you following me?
Okay.
Why are you following me?
Yeah, inshallah. Yes,
Why don't you follow
go ahead.
Muslim people?
So to me then, it seems as if they were arguing substantially enough about what should have been in the Quran. And Uthman came and standardized it because there's a hadith that says, and it's Sahih hadith, where it says that,
go to Muslim people and speak to them.
It says, "O chief of the believers,
go to Muslim
save us, save this nation before we become like the Christians and the Jews."
Okay. So no, but this is
send to come to them. Go to Muslim people.
So my question is then, if so for example Ubay ibn Ka'b had 116 surahs,
but he didn't, like I said, he didn't. That's not an opinion that he kept, and that's not. There's
but at one point he did though.
No, there's no evidence.
Was reached.
There's no evidence of that. He had two.
There's a hadith where he complains that he has learned how to recite. He has memorized 70 surahs of the Quran, and he's complaining they don't take all of what he says.
No, there's no evidence. There's no clear evidence that he took 115, 116 as the Quran. Yeah, these were just two du'ats that he put. Du'a al-Qunut, it's called. He put them in his mushaf.
Yeah, he put him in his mushaf. So he was considering Quran, and there were differences about whether or not that should be Quran.
The issue is, here's the issue, right? With the companions' masahif, for example, they would write on it. So they would put their notes on it. They were not meant to be the official standard copy. The official standard copy of the Quran was the one that was collated by Uthman. Otherwise, if everyone, their personal copies was meant to...
Wait, but this came before Uthman. Uthman took their copies along with Zayd ibn Ka'b, his copy, and then he collated with other materials.
The first one was at the time of Abu Bakr.
The time of Abu Bakr, 634.
Yeah.
And they did that because they were...
I'm sure you have some...
you
go, so good.
What I'm saying though is that the first time it was written down in Abu Bakr's copy,
yes,
they feared, and this is again in Sahih Hadith, they feared the parts of the Quran could be lost.
Say again?
The parts of the Quran could be lost. Yeah, you're aware of that?
Say again, sorry?
The parts of the Quran could be lost.
At the time of Abu Bakr?
Abu Bakr, yeah.
Yeah, but at the time of Abu Bakr, it wasn't, I mean, they weren't really concerned, they're hyperfixated about the Quran as a physical copy because there were so many hafaz. People have memorized the Quran.
No. There was a fear that that word you used. Sorry,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm talking about 634.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So what you're talking about is that when Umar ibn Khattab and Abu Bakr Siddiq were having a conversation, and Umar was on the side, Umar the second caliph, Abu Bakr didn't want to he didn't want to even have a book.
That's what I'm talking about,
that's what he's talking about. So Umar said no, he made those arguments.
So what I'm saying is that he made it clear.
But he also made an argument from the Quran. So the Quran calls itself kitab.
Yeah.
So he says, because what Abu Bakr was afraid of here was less to do with the preservation issue. It was more to do with the fact that he would do something that the Prophet Muhammad didn't do. So Abu Bakr Siddiq, in order to not do, so Umar al-Khattab had to argue textually through the Quran in order to show that actually, in order to show, that it was legitimate. So he said that the word kitab is used in reference to the Quran,
right? And
so therefore you can make it into a book.
Right. Okay, but my understanding though is that you're right. He was talking about how. My understanding of that hadith is twofold, but the most important part is that he is saying that the memorizers of the Quran are in fear of dying in battle, and therefore parts of the Quran could be lost. We can go. Do you want me to read the hadith?
No. There was that
okay,
as well.
Okay.
But
so is it not true that there's a part of, I think it might be Surah 9, it might be some other surah, where there was only one person who remembered it? I think there's a hadith where it says that we only got that one thing from that one person.
No. There was what you're maybe referring to. I don't know if you're referring to this. You can read out if you have it. What I'm talking about, basically, at the time of Abu Bakr, when Zayd ibn Harith, Zayd ibn Thabit was commissioned to go and basically be the head of the Quran
trees and the stones.
But also he said that for each verse there had to be 2 witnesses to each verse.
Okay. Sure.
So for each verse there had to be 2 witnesses.
Sure.
So that's why there was one particular verse, because the Prophet had made a specific supplication where Zayd ibn Harith only took it from one person, but it was understood by everyone else. So basically the Quran as we have it today, you could say that the consensus of the companions on 2 occasions were on it. The first time was at the time of Abu Bakr, and the second time was at the time of Uthman. The reason why it was necessary, the reason why it's important at the time of Uthman, is because Islam had spread to different nations.
And they were talking about how those further north, and Sham, and
Azerbaijan and these places.
Yeah. They were talking about those who had their codices there. Their recitations were different from what they knew,
so that
and they worried about
bring
it.
them all, burn
bring them. Yeah, you're familiar with
of course.
So my understanding is that because there was a process of taking Quranic materials, compiling them into Uthmanic copy in the Qurayshi dialect, and then burning all other Quranic materials, there is a clear and recorded and quite honest example of where what once was considered Quran is now not longer Quran.
Which one? Which verse are you talking about?
Okay, so Uthman, when he collected, what was he collecting? Was it Quranic materials?
No, he wasn't collecting. At this point, it was not a matter of collecting.
Okay,
no, that was at the time of Abu Bakr. The time of Abu Bakr,
so I'm talking about Uthman now. That's
Uthman wasn't collecting parchments and...
No, Abu Bakr was, What I'm saying is, Uthman though, at this time when they were differing about it up north, there would have been codices, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, that differed. He would have taken those, and he would have also taken Zayd bin Thabit, that copy as well.
Are you talking about Uthman?
Uthman, Uthman.
No, he wasn't doing any of that. All he was doing, he got Zayd bin Thabit again.
Yeah, he did, and he got others.
No, he got all others, of course. It was a legend. It was called a legend. It was a commission.
Sure. He got all the different Quranic materials. He then, whenever there were differences, he would choose the Qurayshi dialect. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's another issue. Okay, the Qurayshi dialect.
And then whatever else was left that was not in his copy, he burnt.
Okay, you get it. In a way, you're right.
Quranic materials. Was that Quranic materials?
He burnt.
Yeah, that some people would have thought it's Quranic.
Could have been some part of it.
Right.
Some people.
So that is enough to establish my argument.
You're right. Some
which is that the Quran, as it would be understood by Muslims, is not perfectly preserved.
No, here's the thing. The Quran says, فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا وَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَإِنَّمَا هُمْ فِي شِقَاقٍ. If they believe in what you guys believe in, then they're on the right path. And if they don't, then they're astray. You guys is their companions, because it's a second person, and it's the primary audience. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين من بعدي عضوا عليه بالنواجذ. That upon you is to follow my sunnah and the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs after me, bite upon it with your molar teeth. And in another hadith he mentioned, whatever. The point is that there's a difference between the companions, who we believe God has given the stamp of approval to in many verses of the Quran.
But they differ though.
No, I'm not saying that. What my argument is that the variance that existed within the variances within the companion circle.
Okay, so there were variances within the companion circle.
Yes, of course.
There were.
Those variances were acceptable to the companions.
Okay.
They were acceptable.
But didn't they argue about it? But I mean, like
after the Prophet's death.
After the Prophet's death, in 652 at the time of Uthman.
When you say when they argued about it, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, I'll get the hadith out.
No. Do you mean when you say argue by it?
Yeah, they say, what was it? Save us! Oh, save the nation, lest we end up.
Adrik ummatak. No, that's not the companions. So that's what you're talking here. Is not the companions arguing with themselves. This is Uthman being told that. This is Uthman being told that because Islam has spread. These guys who have newly become Muslim, just learned the Arabic language, Persia, this place, that place. They're reading in a certain way. So quickly before they start reading it wrong and it spreads wrong, bring all of their codices, burn it, and just have one standardized version.
Right. So they were saying things that were substantially different enough to bicker about.
Those people that newly converted to Islam, of course.
Well, we already know that Ubay ibn Ka'b and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, their codices were up north.
We mentioned.
Remember that?
Sorry.
They were for that. So
but they were.
I think Ubay ibn Ka'b may have been from Kufa. I think. Or Basra.
No. These guys were all at the time of the Prophet. They were companions.
Yeah, those guys were.
No, but I think we need to kind of get this right?
Okay.
What I'm saying to you is, yes, the companions, one companion sometimes had a word, for example, Malik and Malik, owner and king, whatever, which was different to another companion.
Okay, well that's the Qira'ah, that's what
but that's where it comes from.
Well, no, because I'm talking about the Haruf, because I think they differed on the Haruf.
No, I'm saying is the Ahruf inform the Qira'at.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the Ahruf, I think they disagreed with.
Say again?
The Ahruf, I can't
that's fine.
I think they disagreed with.
Who?
Because they had different codices with different surahs in them.
No. The point you're making about different surahs, the numbers of the surahs, the two examples you've given, as I've said, they were reversed.
So I know that later they changed their mind.
The better example, I'll make your argument for you. The better example is on select words.
Okay.
So for example, I've just given you an example of in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. Abu Darda, where he recites it differently. I'm saying that he heard it from the Prophet differently to the way someone else heard it, but because that's what the Prophet had it two ways.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with the hadith. I've read the hadith.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that yes, I think that there was 7 ahruf, but they differed on what that was enough so that Uthman had to come in and standardize the Quran. That's what I'm saying.
The differences on the ahruf didn't really emerge until after the companions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were they arguing about in the time of Uthman?
No, they weren't arguing. The companions were not arguing about
Let's
this.
just save us before we become like
No,
Christians and
adrik
the Jews.
ummatak, this hadith. Save your ummah.
Yeah. People,
Adrik ummatak. Save your ummah before they become like the Jews and the Christians. قبل أن يختلفوا اختلاف اليهود والنصارى.
And that was for Uthman to go and collect and standardize what the Quran is.
He's talking about the new Muslims that have come into Islam. They've just learned Arabic. They were reciting it wrong.
Wait, but the question is which is correct? And that was what Uthman was trying to establish.
No.
He took all the different Quranic materials.
I understand it.
And then he was saying, is this correct? Is this correct?
Chris,
yeah.
Here's the issue.
Okay.
Those new guys that come into Islam, did they meet the Prophet?
I don't think that's necessarily what that's referring to.
No, it definitely was.
I think that's referring to Ubay ibn Ka'b's code.
No way.
Well, it would make sense, wouldn't it?
No, it wouldn't. Because
why wasn't it?
No, definitely not.
But they have different levels of surahs.
No, let me tell you why it's definitely not referring to that.
Why? Right. Despite the fact that we're in that area.
No, أدرك أمتك قبل أن يختلفوا اختلاف اليهود والنصارى.
You have to translate.
Which is that.
Yeah.
This is the hadith.
Right.
That save your nation. Basically, this is a good translation. Save your nation, i.e. the Muslim, the Ummah, before they start differing the difference of the Jews and the Christians.
Yeah.
This was at a time where Islam spread to Azerbaijan. Yeah. Now, it was a new conquest.
Yeah.
It was a fresh conquest.
Right, I understand that point of view, but what I'm saying is though, the 2 companions of Muhammad, who were considered master reciters of the Quran,
but they were not,
had different codices in that area.
Are you telling me that Uthman is referring to Ibn Mas'ud?
Well, he would have at least took his codex at that time.
No, because Ibn Mas'ud's in the chain of narration of Uthman's codex. They both have the same chain of narration, and they both teach they both teach the same students. For example, Uthman ibn Affan teaches Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, and so does Ibn Mas'ud. So that's why you'll find both of those companions, the tabi'i or the student that they have identical Quran.
The Qurans that they had in their codices were different.
No, I'm telling you they're the same.
Collected these along with others.
I've got reference for this.
Can you show me?
Yeah. So I don't have it with my hands. It's not even in English. No, it's not in English. It's not been translated. It's in a book called Tabaqat al-Quran. It's in a book.
I don't know. Okay.
No, but that's not fair on me, is it?
I know, but you can't use it as evidence.
No, I can't use it. No, I can't
read it. I don't know.
No, but I'm just telling you.
Okay. Well, tell me what it is, and I'll go research it.
Chris,
tell me what it is.
You have to rely on us to translate the Quran anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't you rely on me to translate the source? I don't get it.
But you haven't translated the source. That's the problem.
All right. Here's the issue. The book is written.
Any text in Arabic, you wouldn't understand it anyway.
Yeah. So it's not fair. It's going to stunt the conversation.
Wait.
So what I'm saying is, I'll give you the reference is a book by Ibn al-Jazari, referred as called Tabaqat al-Qurra, which is the stages of narrators. In it, he mentions that Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami was taught by Uthman ibn Affan and Ibn Mas'ud. That's why they have the same chain of narration. They have the same chain of narration.
Right. How does that relate to my point?
No, because the point you said was you said that Uthman ibn Affan. When he was being told, he wasn't saying it, by the way, أدرك أمتك قبل أن يختلف اختلاف اليهود والنصارى, that save your nation before they come like the Jews and the Christians, i.e. that their books become unpreserved, like you admitted your Bible's unpreserved.
Not perfectly.
Not perfectly preserved, whatever. You admitted it. So he's saying before they become... That's fine, yes, it's not all of them. But say for example that he said that, it was said to him, yeah? I'm saying number one, historical context. This hadith was at the time of Uthman al-Affan, which is some 25 years after the Prophet's death.
652.
Number two, this was when the Azerbaijan was being conquered. And that's why new converts were coming into Islam. Number three, it's the chain of narration of Ibn Mas'ud is the same chain of narration of Uthman al-Affan when it comes to the Quran. So they have the same, they don't differ. And the evidence
they have different surahs though.
No, they don't. I'm saying they don't. For example, you know, if I recite now in the Quran, in the mosque, Hafs and Asim, which is the most, as you know.
Yeah, it's a qira'at though. That comes later. I'm not interested in that part.
No, I get it. But I'm saying that qira'ah comes from the same chain as Ibn Mas'ud. Ibn Mas'ud is actually the main guy in the chain.
Right, that's fine.
Basically, I'm saying to you is Ibn Mas'ud, if he believed that the Quran's 112 surahs, not 114, then why is it
10,
112 surahs, not 114, not Falaq and Nas, the two? If he believed that, then why is it that the chain of narration goes back to Ibn Mas'ud? He believes in 114.
What I'm saying is, at one point they argued about it. I then believe after that, after Uthman had standardized
you agree?
they agree with it.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying that.
Do you understand that?
No, I understand. But what it was is there was.
Even if you admit that they didn't disagree on it, after Muhammad has died, then there's no authority to be able to determine which is the
I'm
correct
happy
view.
to concede the fact that Ibn Mas'ud,
Yeah.
Ibn Mas'ud at one point didn't believe that Falaq and Nas.
And Ubay ibn Ka'b as well.
Ubay ibn Ka'b is more controversial, I have to say, because basically his codex had two du'ats after. It doesn't mean anything.
Okay, yeah, I know that if you don't consider them Quran, you consider them dua. That's fine. Yeah. But what I mean is because people...
I like the way you said du'a there. You said that was good pronunciation.
I do try.
You're good, huh?
What I'm saying is that because they disagree on these things, it makes no sense to say perfect preservation because you don't know what Muhammad himself would have said because Muhammad had died at this point.
So is your qualm only with Falaq and Nas?
No, my qualm is very specific. Only with the term perfect.
Okay, all right.
Do you understand?
What I'm saying to you is,
if you say to me, actually, we can infer what was likely meant. We have good reasons for believing that. Then I can say, okay. But if you tell me that there has been no changes and no variations, then I have
no.
But I think you've agreed on that.
No. We're saying. Let me be very clear about my position here, and this position of the early ones. Yeah. I'm saying is that first of all, when the Quran was being revealed, there were certain ayat that had been revealed in more than one way. It doesn't change the narrative, but at all. Like, all this Quran don't change the narrative at all. The story doesn't change. No, it doesn't change the narrative
at all. How do you know that?
I know that because I've been through all of them.
Yeah, but we don't know necessarily what all those aruf are, do we? Or
No. I'm saying that there's only a superficial cesspool of what it can be.
Right.
So what I'm saying is it's not that many things it can be. Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I'll explain that to you. That's a different conversation. But the point is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in select verses, he said it in one way and another way. Yeah. Like Malik, owner, king. It's not a big difference. Yeah.
Well, they came later. You're talking about the difference between what the Hafs would have recited.
No. But what I'm saying is that Hafs and Warsh or Nafa, in fact, or Asim and Nafa, because Hafs and Nafa as a teacher, Hafs as a student, Warsh as a student, Nafa as a teacher. Nafa would have taken it from the two available options. This is called ikhtiyar al-qari'. So, for example, Ibn Mas'ud would have told Hafs, Asim, it's can be recited Malik and Malik, but obviously he can't recite both, so he chooses Malik or Malik. Both of them the Prophet said, so he just chooses one. So there is a choice, but it's a choice with things which both the Prophet said.
I think that you can have a way of knowing what was likely said and what was likely revealed in most cases, but I think there are some cases in which you don't, in which case it makes no sense to say that the Quran has been perfectly preserved.
Your issue.
Do you understand with that though?
I know what you're saying, but what I'm saying to you is that...
Let's go back to what you said earlier, because you talked about the two different ways, and you said there's one way which is that actually if there's any variance whatsoever, then it cannot be kalam Allah, that's a problem. And then the other way, which is the way that you hold, is the view that actually, as long as there's one Qur'an, one of Allah.
No, what were you saying? What was Kalam Allah?
So you gave two options, yeah? The first one is there's a school of Islam that says if there's any variations, then that's a problem. Is that fair to summarize?
It's not a school, it's just a...
a way of...
it's an opinion.
Some scholars hold that. Okay, an opinion of scholars. Another one is actually... No, we don't hold that.
Say the first one again?
So the idea that there cannot be any variations...
No, that's not what they say.
Okay, so what do they say?
Okay, the first group of scholars say, which is the Qurra and the Mutakallimun, they say that all of the variations must be preserved in order for the Quran to be preserved.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
So if anything is lost or if anything...
Yes.
Right, okay, that makes sense. Okay. So
the second opinion says that only one variation must be kept in order for the Quran to be preserved.
Okay. So on the first view, I think that's evidently not perfectly preserved because there are things that I think are or were supposed to be in the Quran that are not in the Quran.
You can make that argument. You can
I would be convinced by it.
No. You can make the argument, but I'm convinced with the second view anyway.
Okay, that's fine. I understand that. But I think it's important for Muslims to know that that first opinion is wrong.
For example,
I think it's quite clear. Preservation. Perfect.
No, but the thing is, here's my point, Chris. These two people differed on the term perfect or perfection. Because the first group of scholars said, in order for there to be perfect preservation, all the variants must be preserved.
Right.
The second group said, no, only one variant. So for them, perfection was one variant preservation.
Is there an example in the early Ummah, or among the companions, where they believe that the Quran as they had been perfectly preserved.
When you say perfectly, what do you mean?
What I mean is that option one. What you just said, option one.
No, that's the point.
That's interesting. Right?
I've not seen it. I've not come across it.
Okay,
so what I'm saying is,
but what I mean is that I think there's a problem here in the park.
The early days. The early days. Sorry, the early days.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
What I'm saying is,
go on.
Is that Muslims seem to think that the Quran has never been changed.
No, but we're not saying it has been changed.
Well, I'm saying that there have been parts that have been lost.
No, okay, that's different.
Okay, that affects your version one.
No,
you see what I mean?
Let me tell you.
Okay.
Let me explain it. Changed and lost are two different things. The Quran, if we say, look, if we say all the variations, all of the variations of the Quran, like when the Prophet said, "Nuzul al-Quran ala sab'ati ahruf," 7 variations. Is it conceivable on the second view that every single word must be said in more than one way? Some say no, it's not required. So for example, once again, if I were to say Malik Yawmuddin, owner of the Day of Judgment, that's enough. I don't need to say more for the Quran.
I understand that view.
Yeah?
That's fair.
So if for example, let me give you a hypothetical just to make this clear. If the Qira'ah saying Malik Yawmuddin, which is 6 out of 10 by the way, 6 out of 10 Qira'ah. If Malik Yawmuddin wasn't there, on the second view, the Quran would still be preserved. On the first view, the Quran would not be preserved. Do you get it?
I agree.
Yeah.
So I think the problem here then is that there are many Muslims who hold to the first view, not the second. And I just want to make it clear that the first view is wrong. Okay. Because you cannot say...
That doesn't have... Even if you go... let's go,
that's
no
it.
problem.
I think that's it. I think we actually reached a consensus there.
No problem.
Cool.
If that's good. Because if you say that the first view, which is that all the variants must be there, blah, 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 and the second view, which is that only one variant has to be there, what we would say is that in order for something to have creedal disproving implications, religious disproving implications, then the second view would have to be the one that's attacked, not the first. The first view is not sufficient. The first view is just a view of some scholars that came after. The ones who are closer to the Prophet Muhammad, like At-Tabari and Abu Amr al-Dani and others.